Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Heatwave stakeholder high threat season briefing for this year. I might just open and acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we're meeting. For us in the State Health Incident Coordination Centre, that's the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. And I'd also like to extend that welcome to the many lands of the areas that people are joining from today from around the state. I'd also like to acknowledge the state health coordinators that are joining us today and appreciate them making some time. My name's Lee Clifton. I'm a Senior Policy Officer at the Disaster Preparedness and Management Directorate for the Department of Health, and Heatwave is a very large portfolio of mine. Following the positive feedback from last year's briefing, we look to provide these briefings ongoing. The aim of the session today is to update our combat agencies on the heatwave hazard for the upcoming season. We look to learn about the climate outlook for the start of the season, and we'll hear a briefing from the Bureau very shortly, and also to convey the changes in the communications for the upcoming season. We're using the Microsoft Town Hall chat function, Teams function today, and if you've got any queries throughout the presentation, if you could put any questions into the Q&A, and then we'll look to answer those at the end of the session. So we look to guide us with the State Hazard Plan Heatwave for our response for the heatwave hazard. On the screen, we've got a number of the combat agencies, which many of you will join us, will be operating from. Combat agencies fall into the following categories: provision of health services or supporting the health industry, the emergency services sector, providers of lifelines such as power, water, or enabling transport, or you might be a peak agency that acts as an information conduit to the vulnerable population. And lastly, you might be a conduit such as local government into the large communities throughout Western Australia. We've also invited members of the WA health system that assist us in our heatwave response. And we thank our WA country health colleagues that undertake the role of incident coordination in regional areas. Just as a reminder, there is an expectation that agencies that have a responsibility under the State Hazard Plan have their own plans on how they're going to operationalise their functions. So before we move into the season outlook,
Okay.
That's just a delay coming through. Okay.
Yes,
So I just noticed a delay. The slide's updating at the moment, but it's coming through. Come through?
Yeah.
Before we get into the seasonal outlook, I just want to have a bit of a reflection on the season that we've just come out of. So we had 5 activations from the previous season, not dissimilar to other years. The first heat waves have been observed in the Pilbara and the Kimberley area, and then there was also last year some sections of the northern Midwest area as well. Moving into January, larger heat waves affected the Wheatbelt, the Goldfields, and the East Metropolitan area, and then concurrently a small section of the Southwest in an area adjacent to Collie was also impacted by some extreme heat. And then moving into the later in January, again, large sections of the state with the Wheatbelt, the Goldfields, the Midwest, and the Pilbara. And then after a small reprieve of typical summer conditions, and then into early March, where we activated some emergency WA alerts, although there wasn't a multi-agency response. I now want to look into a bit of a reflection on the larger heat wave that occurred, which was on the 17th and the 27th of January. Yeah, I think they're just going to be a bit slow in coming up. Just checking that's popped through. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to look at one of the larger heat waves that impacted very large sections of the state. This heat wave ran over a total of 10 days, with most areas observing a 4 to 6 day period of extreme heat. The heat wave commenced in locations inland from the coast around the Perth area and went as north as Jurien Bay, and then with the heat moving slowly east, moved through the Wheatbelt area and then into the Goldfields. Over this period, we observed 103 presentations for a clinical code that reflects direct heat exposure. We also know that other factors such as chronic health conditions can result in increased presentations. These are likely to be more difficult to track, but we do know that they're directly attributed to the heatwave. Some of the forecasts that were observed in the heatwave period, Kalamunda with some minimums between 28 and maximums of 45, Beacon in the wheat belt with minimums minimum around 27 and maximums up to 44, and Kalgoorlie with a minimum of 25 and up to 44. And at one stage in this heat wave that came through, every town in the goldfields was under some form of warning. Very large areas of the population experienced extreme heat at some stage as the hot weather moved east. So that was a reflection on just one of the larger heat waves. Now I'd like to introduce James Ashley. James is the State Manager of Hazard Preparedness in WA, and he's going to provide us a seasonal outlook. So I'll get Kath to bring James in.
There we go. All right, we're away. All right, thanks everyone for having me. Thanks, Lee, for the invite. I won't go into the maths this year, which I've done in previous times, but I just wanted to really reiterate that what the Bureau defines as a heat wave is a period of at least 3 days where the maximum and minimum, importantly, the maximum and the minimum, are unusually hot over a location. And we also compare it to the last 30 days of temperatures at that location as well. So it has to have been, you get a stronger heatwave signal the more of a departure from the recent weather in that location. And we put all that into a formula and come up with what's called the excess heat factor. So basically a measure of how significant that heat is across that 3-day period and how much of a shock that heat is compared to what we've seen in the last month. And this is all just revisionary stuff. And we issue warnings for severe and extreme heat waves when that EHF is above 1 for severe and above 3 for extreme. And we have low intensity heat waves when the EHF is above 0. A quick recap on last year, we issued 116 warnings. That includes cancellations. Just note that doesn't mean there are 116 heat waves because each heat wave has multiple warnings. They often last more than 1 3-day period. So I don't have the exact numbers, but I suspect it's at less than half of that of actual heat wave events, probably more like 20 or 30. But you can see we hold our own nationally in the heatwave warning stakes, which is unsurprisingly since we're a large hot state. A couple of leads showed the one big event from last year. I just wanted to highlight. So we started warnings in October last year through the Kimberley. Just keep trying to remember this image because it's kind of just popped up now this year as well. And the event that Lee was showing is, I just thought I'd show this because it's an absolute classic example of a heat wave event, a synoptic pattern that's really conducive to heat waves, particularly near the west coast. You have these really strong easterlies, a low or a tropical system up off the northwest, and a good squeeze in the easterlies. Sea breezes either light or non-existent, so that heat from central Australia really gets dragged to the west coast. And if that low in the north is slow moving, that can lead to a prolonged period of hot weather. And very quickly, if we look at what we're heading for this coming summer, I just thought I'd show rainfall, which seems like a pretty weird thing to show talking about heat. But particularly in the north, rainfall, heat waves are really dependent on where the cloud and rainfall is. So anywhere sort of north of Port Hedland at the moment, you can see there's not a strong signal of wetter than normal conditions up in the northern parts of WA. By October, we struggle to see any of these cooling southeasterly surges pushing north, certainly into that area. So the only way to get rid of the heat up in the north from now right through the wet season is for rain and cloud. So October looks pretty light on as far as rain goes, or at least pretty average. But by the time we get to November, we're starting to see a bit more likelihood of rain, certainly above average rainfall across the northern parts of the Kimberley, northern and eastern Kimberley. So I'd expect the heat wave risk to start reducing up in the north, whereas for these areas with no strong signal for above average rainfall and a pretty dryish time of the year, you're probably going to see a higher risk of heat waves just based on this rainfall pattern. And by the time we go, this is the season. This on the far right is from the 3 months from November to January, and you see there's not a strong signal for wetter or drier conditions than normal. So probably looking at fairly the rainfall influence on the heat is pretty much normal. So now we look into the actual temperature outlooks. A lot of red here, which is pretty normal. Unusually November is less red than a lot of months we see these days, even though the base period is 81 to 2018. Because of the warming we've seen in the last decade or so, we often see these red, predominantly red images through here, particularly in the minimums. But you can see generally above average conditions forecast for October. Most of the state through November, you can see this little area up here is probably influenced by rain and probably onshore cooler flow into the southeast of the state, which maintains through the early parts of summer. But if we look at the terciles, so this is showing the chance of unusually high maximum and maximum temperatures. So this is where the temperatures are in the hottest 20 months for that time of year. So for the hottest 20 months for October, November, and the hottest 3-month period from November to January. And you can see, as I mentioned before, probably due to lack of any cooling influence from the south in the winds and no significant rainfall expected through this month in the Kimberley, a higher than normal risk, up to 3 or 4 times higher than normal. We're going to be in that top 20% of October temperatures up there, which means the risk of heat wave is certainly higher than normal through the northern parts of the state in October. You'd notice a signal also down the west coast, but temperatures generally not hot enough to trigger a heat wave signal for the southern half of the state at this time of year. By the time we get into November, you can see it's sort of the signal reduces a little bit in that northeast, but still a pretty significant signal through southwest Kimberley, most of the Pilbara and interior. So expect a higher than normal risk of heat waves through November in those areas. And then by that sort of November to January season, like three months, excuse me, you can see that the heat signal is starting to build downwards towards the southwest of the state. I've got, excuse me, I've produced links on this presentation. Hopefully Lee will be able to share it afterwards, but I encourage everyone to keep track of these. These will be updated every week on a Thursday, so you can see how it's evolving. And by this Thursday, you'll see a season from December across to February, so the whole of summer. And I'd expect that to see that west coast signal building as well. So basically, upshot of that is higher than normal risk of heat waves in the north for October, sort of most of the northern half of the state for November. I assume my images are still there. My screen's just changed. Can we get a thumbs up, Lee, if you can still see my presentation?
Sorry, it just dropped off.
All right, I'll try and share again. All right. Hopefully that's coming through. Yeah, so as I was saying, sort of heatwave risk in the north this month, slowly drifting southwards, and probably by late November, December, we'll start seeing heatwave risk down into the southwest of the state. A couple of extra things I just wanted to highlight. So I can find my, here we go. Okay, a couple of changes for this year. Well, some timelines really. The forecast maps and text, similar to this image here, that gets issued by 12:30 Western Standard Time daily. So you'll be able to pick that up on the web. This image on the right shows the decision support product that some of you will have access to. That's generally available by 11:30, probably between 11 and 11:30, so a bit earlier than normal this year. Heatwave warnings are issued when we have 10% of a district in severe or extreme, and they get issued by 2 p.m. And from today, big day at the Bureau, we're actually increasing the frequency of our products and changing the times for WA to align with national production times. So rather than our forecasts coming out at 4 a.m., 4 p.m., they're coming out 4 times a day at 1 and 7 a.m., 1 and 7 p.m., which aligns with the app. And so you'll be able to see the temperatures and seeing how they're trending more frequently during the day. And just on that website, that's changing later this month. Encourage you to have a look if you haven't already. It's at beta.bom.gov.au. Interested in feedback, basically our current website, which hasn't been changed for 15, 20 years, is moving to something that looks a bit more like the app, a bit more dynamic. Importantly, for those of you who have access to the registered users page, there's no change to that. Your links may redirect you to the new website, but a lot of them will remain. Not everything has come across, so some things will stay on the old website. But really encourage you to have a look at that beta website in the next few weeks. And when it does flip over, please check your links, and you may need to update some of them. Really encourage you to do that so that it's not in the in the middle of a heat wave that you're trying to find something and you can't find it because it's on the new website and somewhere else. And also on the new website, the links are down the bottom for the beta, but that will change. The beta will change to www towards the end of the month. The heatwave maps will be a dynamic map where you can zoom and pan and do all that sort of thing. Just noting that the day you choose in the slider bar down here, that will be the last day of the 3-day period. So that image shown there, which was a heatwave event from last summer, that is the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday heatwave signal. Also on the website is the Knowledge Centre. Encourage you also to have a look at that. That you'll be redirected to that site now. So those knowledge centres have already moved across into the new website. And that's it from me. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Lee.
Thanks, James. I'll just juggle a couple of volumes here so we don't have any echoing. So thank you for that. And also, if there's any questions relating to please put any questions into the chat area, and then we'll look to address those ones at the end. Just bear with me while I bring the slide deck back up. So that's just me. Here we go. Okay, I think that's starting to come through now. Thanks again, James. So the next few slides I'm going to speak to in regards to the heatwave communication. Yeah, that'll pop up in a minute. Into the heatwave communication strategy that we will follow. So Health uses the Australian warning systems, and we publish these warnings on the Emergency WA platform. When we publish these alerts, we've configured the emergency radio broadcaster to receive these notifications. On the screen are the action statements. On the left-hand side are the action statements that we will look to be using for heatwave. So I'll step you through how we use those. We attempt to align the advice alert to occur on the day leading into the heatwave, or might be into the morning as that heatwave is starting. We'll then escalate to a watch and act for the duration of the heatwave event. And it could be possible that areas might be on a watch and act for 3 or more days. As James mentioned before, heat waves occurring for a minimum of 3 days. As the heat wave starts to abate, we'll regress back to the advice level warning with an action statement of threat is reduced. And then the actions we list is as per what we've got on Healthy WA under what to do after a heat wave. In regards to emergency warning, they're likely to only be used when there's concurrent outages to lifelines or very long duration heat waves. Fortunately, to date, we haven't needed to use the emergency warning level. If agencies are wanting to receive any of the emergency WA alerts via email, you can do that by using your Outlook client and using an RSS feed. Website, and refer to the options on the website. The other one I might want to point you to is the Emergency WA app that most of you are likely to be aware that has come up and was published and promoted at the end of last year. This app has the capability of using location-based warnings, so do encourage you to set your warnings into the localities in which you're working. The other information source we have is the Healthy WA page. This information has a number of fact sheets that are established for at-risk groups such as the elderly, the young, and pregnant mums. We also have information for agencies such as specialised areas, including outdoor workers, sporting events, the education sector, festival and event organisers. With these fact sheets, we do request that agencies do use these, but please just reproduce the products that we've provided rather than developing your own. These fact sheets have been developed with the advice of a medical advisor, and we don't want the heat health messaging to be taken out of context. The other area that we use our messaging is onto the social media platforms. So on the left-hand side, you'll see messaging from our communications team that will be organically published and publishing heat health safety messaging. And you might see more frequently, or these being used a little bit more frequently as the warmer days come up, and that's on the left-hand side. As we move into the heat wave, the community alerts will be aligned to the Australian warning system and similar to what you see on Emergency WA. At a minimum, we do request agencies do promulgate these messages and post these within your areas, because we recognise through particularly local government and many of the other government agencies that there is a large social media spread that and we can reach the WA population quite successfully. For agencies that support First Nations people, I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal Health Council of WA for using permission to use their information booklet, Staying Healthy in Hot Times. Where your agency supports First Nations people, this resource is available from the ARCHO websites and also linked from the Healthy WA website. I want to use this opportunity to speak through the interface between the Bureau's alerts and also the heatwave alerts that we issued. So as James spoke to before, the Bureau will issue heatwave warnings for severe and extreme heat waves that are impacting an area and impacting more than 10% of that population base. The Department of Health will use those excess heat factor warnings and the excess heat factor value itself. We'll also use the Bureau's forecasting analysis, look at the anticipated community impact, community events, public holidays, where we see that there might be many people travelling, and then consider how that interfaces with the activation of the State Hazard Plan for Heatwave. Some new improvements that we've got moving into for this season. We're pleased to let you know of a new heatwave initiative that we're working on with Red Cross. In an effort to increase protection of the WA community, we are partnering with Red Cross to pilot a program called Telecross Ready. This is a program where Red Cross volunteers make daily phone contact with registered vulnerable people in the community, and they do this while the heatwave is occurring. The call taker will ensure that the client is taking precautions to stay safe during the heat and have a conversation with them on heat health safety. If there's any concerns that the call taker has, they will then follow an escalation pathway to ensure that that person is looked after. Our colleagues in South Australia have been using this service with many success stories. At the moment, we're still working through the final arrangements with Red Cross, and we'll look to promote this service with the many agencies in the short coming future. Agencies that do support the at-risk groups will be approached and will seek some input to look to see whether their clients could be registered. At the moment, the Telecross Ready program is not released, and we do request that agencies don't approach Red Cross directly with this program, but again, we will come back to you. Some of the other areas we're looking at this year will be making sure that we're being very consistent with our incident level declarations, as these can be challenging when we're following the State Emergency Management Plan guidelines and the State Emergency Management Plan. So this year you might observe some heat waves being declared at a slightly higher level than what they were done in the previous years. And really that's just us making sure we're staying true to what the State EM Plan and guidelines detail. The last point was looking to increase the local government involvement, particularly in incident support group and operational area support groups. And last season, if we reflect back on the mid-January heatwave, we were unsure of the activation mechanism we were using, and probably in hindsight, we should have been using the operational area support group mechanism, and that would have brought in the local government input into that. So for those in the local government space, we'll be looking to particularly in the metro area, we'll be looking to bring in local governments a little bit more strongly. So this section, I just want to, I suppose, not trying to oversimplify, but looking at the heatwave cadence that we run through. So the department will be monitoring the excess heat factor throughout November and into March. Once those extreme heatwave triggers have been met, and then that determines that the State Hazard Plan is activated. We then look to appoint incident controller or controllers. And just to speak to that component, multiple incident controllers may be selected where we have a heatwave that's affecting, for example, the metropolitan area. There might be another incident controller if the heatwave is also affecting the Wheatbelt area. And again, if that heatwave was further impacting the Goldfields area, then we'd be using separate incident controllers across that heatwave event. Internally, incident management teams are then activated, and the cadence of incident support group operational area support groups are informed and activated. With our Department of Health media colleagues and plus or minus WA Country Health, if the heat wave is affecting a country area, we'll be then promulgating the messaging throughout our social media streams. We're then into the cadence of monitoring the impacts and managing the risk that's presenting from the hazard itself, and into a repeating process from there. So again, not to oversimplify, but that's the process that we will be following. So as I'm bringing this section to a conclusion, I just want to speak about the Web Fusion component. So for government agencies that use WebEC and are on the Web Fusion Memorandum of Understanding, we'll be proactively using the Fusion service to share information and equally appreciate those agencies reporting any issues and observations. Otherwise, other agencies, we do appreciate any observations and impacts that you're observing as well. and we've provided the State Health Incident Coordination Centre email address on the screen for you to send any of those observations through. Likewise, we've also got our 1-800 number. So that's bringing this section to a close. I might just pause and check with my colleagues if there's any questions that have come through. Nothing's come through. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank agencies again for their assistance, and thanking in advance for your expertise when we get into the heatwave response phase. I think it's fair to say that we'll be working together at some stage throughout this summer. So thank you and good morning.